When's this air?
I can hold it till whenever you want. So if there's an announcement
I'll
coming up,
I'll leak you right now.
please.
We're going to be announcing a Real Big Fish reunion
That's crazy.
for Long Beach. Yeah.
I know you worked a lot in the festival circuit, but did you have dreams and goals of having your own?
No, I think, that really started to formulate around 1991 when I was out on the road with Lollapalooza. I was the first stage manager of that when it was a touring festival. And I started kind of looking that was my first real exposure to the road and also to all these places like in between, the traveling and going to St. Louis and going to Minneapolis and these kind of places. And then working in the scene of LA where I was working 320 shows a year, starting to hear this music like, Sublime, No Doubt, this kind of world I was working in, all the punk bands and everything. And then starting to realize that these bands and talking to them, they didn't really have a connection. It was hard for them to tour outside like the big cities, and go to Chicago, New York. There's little pockets, but and I was like the skateboard culture that I'm kind of part of, I was doing a lot of big skateboard events, and I was like, and then sitting in the snow in 1995, we were doing Board Aid, and it kind of dawned on me, man, I should probably try to do this ourselves before we were working for someone else because the X Games had just been announced. So the X Games, I heard it backstage at Board Aid, and one of the bands I worked with on that Lollapalooza was Jane's Addiction, and I had convinced Perry at that snowboard show, and it was Porno for Pyros at that point. He hadn't done any, and I said, wouldn't it be cool to play Coming Down the Mountain? Like we're doing a snowboard show. And it was just this intense moment of a board across, snowball fights, people climbing on the stage because he had not done a Jane's Addiction song since he had left. And he played Coming Down the Mountain. And right after that, I was just sitting there going, maybe I should try to do something myself. Maybe I should go out, bring a skateboard ramp, bring some of these bands that are known on the West Coast and some of these pockets and see if we can tie this all together for kids.
How big of a gamble was it for you to bring them around?
It was a total gamble. I was pretty much broke after the first one. It invested my own money. I had a partner. That's when I had gotten CAA as my partner. So they were able to get some guarantees from the promoters, but the promoters were losing money. We were just struggling down the road. We were, it was a gypsy caravan. There was no food some days. There was no kids some days, but we just kept setting up. I think we exposed ourselves to enough people who realized I wasn't trying to duplicate what had already been done with Lollapalooza. Some people thought I was going to do that I was actually trying to do something different. And then that's where the bands started to pay attention because bands talking is your best sort of promotion for anything. When the band started talking, they got home and there was No Doubt and Sublime and No Use for a Name on the West Coast and Quicksand and Orange 9mm on the East Coast, Seaweed up in Seattle. Started telling their friends like, whoa, that tour was crazy. Like it was just like a bunch of rogue pirates going down the road figuring out how to make it work. And then, I get a call, and it was, Fletcher from Pennywise and Fat Mike from NoFX, and I went and met him. Like, literally, it wasn't an agent that brought them to me, and agents wouldn't even take my call, really. It was the band members who met with me and said, we want to do this. We want to be part of this. This sounds really different. And even back then, we hear about bands wanting to do something different. Going and doing the same shows, the same venues, the same clubs, doing something different. So when they embraced the tour in 1996, it kind of brought the level up exposure of, even though Sublime and No Doubt became bigger after Warped Tour, it brought it up in the eyes of a community, which was that punk community. Even though I worked in that community, I was the guy who loaded your trucks. I'm the guy who threw you off stage. I'm the guy who set up your dressing rooms. And then, having all that background from working 12 years before I started this, making other people look good. They were like, let's give Kevin a second chance. And I got that second chance in 96. We went out and, the crowds got bigger. The promoters made back the money they maybe lost the first year. And we were kind of off to the races in a strange way for it wasn't without its challenges, but we adapted because we didn't change too much. We kind of wanted to create this backyard party that you felt accessible. The fans had access, so the stages weren't overwhelming. Pretty open access to the bands going out in the crowds and signing autographs. The community backstage. It lasted. We made it for 25 years, and then now bringing it back. The only difference is we have bigger stages, bigger video. We have video now. We didn't have any video, and we have lights, we go into the nighttime, but it's still, and that was what was so hard. I was so nervous. Right. Would it feel like Warped Tour between the stages? Would it feel like your sense of adventure? So you're going to run into nonprofits. The bands were going to be signing. There were surprise moments where bands were involved with some of those sponsors that helped supplement to keep the ticket price down. Not, got goosebumps like unveiling the lineup each day. How great was it when we opened the doors and there was like 6,000 people surrounding the balloon,
That was the magic.
and
Running into Patent Pending at right when the doors open to seeing Motion City Soundtrack doing a signing with all the Warp booklets.
Yeah, and that's what, so we're doing it, first year was probably easy. There was like this kind of nostalgia for a lot of people to come, but there was a lot of new people came, and that was my goal, to get young people that were striving for that sense of community that crowd had back in the early days of Warped Tour. And, that came from being a professor at a university and constantly talking to young people who were coming post-pandemic and kind of realizing that they didn't really have a community. It was a little fractured. So I thought maybe I could recreate something for some people, a few weekends a year, that they can come out. Can't go on the tour. I can't physically tour for 22 months anymore. That was brutal. I wish I could. I'd almost be like a challenge. Like I think you bring a bunch of old 60-something-year-olds and see if they can do a 2-month Warped Tour again and see how many of us would be dropping and buried in shallow graves in parking lots.
Start a little later in the day. Give a little more time.
But it's been interesting, and we're back and have the opportunity with my partner Insomniac to say, hey, let's take the brand to Mexico this year. We have a great partner, a young guy who grew up learning about Warped Tour and came up here as a visitor, and then that's what you need in those territories, someone that can help you guide the brand. And now we're going back up to Montreal. Love Canada. So this time when we're supposed to they're pushing us all away. Music can bring us together. The three countries, united under Warped. I know that's a little glossy, but I believe it. I believe music can bring people together.
That first year of Warped Tour was not profitable. Was it normal for you to continue at a loss? Was that easy to keep getting money and keep it going?
Oh, it was never easy. We only had the loss the first year. The tour started making some money. And
where does that money come from? Is it the sponsors and ticket sales?
We kept the ticket. Yeah. So we only made money on ticket sales 2 years.
Which is crazy.
In 2005, when everything hit, like My Chemical Romance, Fall Out Boy, Avenged Sevenfold, Offspring, it was just this convergence of wildness based around TRL, Total Request Live. And that was almost scary because, we would do about 500,000 people each summer. That was our kind of a baseline. That year we did 780,000 people.
Wow.
But 280,000 of those people got off a couch from watching TRL all summer to come see their new favorite bands and pretty much passed out in the sun because they weren't ready for 9-hour Warped Tour day. And then in 2018, the second to the last year, the last nationwide tour, it was always supplemented by those brands and sponsors.
What brought the big bump in 2018?
Saying goodbye.
Oh, it was the farewell.
It was the farewell full cross-country tour. I also went a little bit nostalgia. Like I was always trying to invest in new bands and new scenes. That summer, I had a rough summer in 2017. We actually lost money that year. And then in 2018, I was just like, we're going back, a little bit nostalgia. I want to tour with my friends one last time. I want good crews that are seasoned. I'm not going to have any problems out here. Sadly, had to run it like a benign dictator again. I don't want to be that, but sometimes as a producer, you have to be. And we just had a great last summer. It was just a lot of fun. It was also the year that the promoters called me and said, what happened with Warped Tour? We'd never sold this much beer. We sold more beer in 2018 than we did in the first 24 years. And, it was a lot of people coming back basically for the last chance, last run. But that was a funny call I got after the second show. The venue goes, we ran out of beer. We usually don't sell any beer at Warped Tour because I was always trying to invest in those younger fans to come to Warped Tour. That year was just straight up, I'm going to go have a nice summer. I'm going to hang out with some old friends. No drama. Not going to put it up. We had one little bit of drama. I just sent the band home because it wasn't going to deal with it,
Would that happen often where you'd have to send somebody home?
No, we didn't send many bands home for Warped Tour. It was just they got there the first day and decided to trash all the gear that we supply some of the band's equipment. And they got on stage the first day and broke the drum kit, and that's not their gear. And I was just like, not going to put up with this shit. Sorry.
What made you want to give a band a chance to try and break on that summer?
In 2000, any summer?
Any summer. What did you look for? I know you used to have people come work at the food tent and then they can get a stage.
Well, that was kind of little secret fun area. But really, it was a lot of vetting of the first probably 10 years from working in the clubs 320 nights a year. Before that, those were bands I knew. Those were my peers. Those were the bands that I watched grow up in the venues. I was working at the Roxy, the Whiskey, what's now the Avalon. It's the Palladium, multi venues that are no longer there, and watching these bands grow, and then bringing them out and Warped. But I knew a good live show, so I was booking my peers. I knew the music. I was there. The last 12, 13 years, I was pretty much either a mentor or a disciplinarian, I guess, in a way. But I also started to depend on trusted agents. We've lost an agent, Dave Shapiro, one of my dear friends, was killed in a plane crash, and miss him a lot. But we had a very great relationship. He knew to send his best bands to me. It was called the Pilgrimage to Pasadena. It was really weird because, we talk about the music business being over west of La Brea sometimes, but everyone had to come to my house. And Pilgrimage to Pasadena was just like a good time because I couldn't drive around to meetings and everything. Everyone had to come to my house. So labels would come, Hopeless, Fearless, Pure Noise, you name the label. They came over. We sat in the backyard and they told me about young acts, the bands that they were kind of going to release albums going into Warped Tour. I had a big whiteboard and I was in the back writing things in because I put out my dream lineup at the beginning. Oh, they're not going to tour. Oh, this is okay. We'll replace it this. And then I was like always wanting to make sure the labels were involved. So I tried to engage those indie labels, and then I'd listen. And then there was moments when, a crew of guys with mohawks would be walking down my driveway, and my wife goes, I actually knew I was safe because they had mohawks. It wasn't like anyone breaking into our home. They were looking for me to drop a demo tape off. It was like showing up here today at your house. It's like, and it was really cool because I would just hang and we would have, and then the meetings would start rolling into each other. So all of a sudden, Hopeless would run into Bob from Fearless, and then we'd all end up, and I'd start barbecuing, similar to Warped Tour backstage. And I had a basketball and a swimming pool. So everyone was like jumping in the pool, playing basketball, just hanging out, talking about music. It was actually a pretty good time. Now, then I would have to go into that booking process, and there's certain bands got Warped Tour and certain didn't. That was fine. And then there were certain agents that understood Warped Tour, and there's ones that didn't. And with someone like Dave, I remember we had something like we confirmed 9 bands in 14 minutes and planned a fishing trip. That's like how he knew how I would negotiate, and it was really cool. And now coming back, booking is, it comes down to a lot of times with economics. We came back with a low ticket price. I think our festival is, of course, the lowest festival. You can go for 2 days. Starts at $150, including fees. And there's bands we want that are just in a different economic model. And that's cool that they earn that economic model. They get bigger guarantees. We're trying to balance all that out again. We're trying to find bands that want to come and maybe play a Warped because they always have a good time. We always have a nice time. Nice things were told to me during that first week when we came back. When we came back, bands were coming up and saying, we play a lot of festivals to make money. That's what we do. Money is our business. We have to make money. And we play Warped Tour because it's home. Warp feels like home. So some of those big bands taking a little bit of a step back financially allows us to have all that development right now. And there's so much excitement around development right now. I was just driving over here listening to Winona Fighter. Honey Revenge. How many strong female artists do we have right now? It's crazy. And then we've got a very diversity coming into punk that was never there before. Paradox, Magnolia Park, Nova Twins. It's really cool to see this evolving eco that excluded people, and I don't know, where that exclusion came from, but maybe people just didn't comfortable playing this music 30 years ago, and people would, but now, man, I come up, I'm like, there could be a whole massive scene. We just got to figure out how to break it out. They don't have things like TRL or Fuse Television. AP Magazine's not quite what it used to be. It's taking a different format. We used to have all these tools to help build these bands up. And that's what I really would love to see. I'd love to see, and that's why you're going to see some of those same bands come back on the second year of Warped this year. They're going to be playing maybe some different markets. Some are playing the same markets. I'm like, I'll bring them back 3 or 4 times, similar to what I did with Paramore. They played 3 years in a row. Day to Remember played 3 years in a row. Pierce the Veil played multi-times. And watch them grow. Their same talent is there. It's just a younger generation of it. We just have to give them the tools to build them up. We really all need to. I think if we were all smart, all the festivals would get together and say, you know what, let's invest in 6 bands this year. Put them on every one of our festivals. Paul Tollett should have them on Coachella this weekend. Danny Wimmer should have them on. Let's put 6 of them on all our festivals and decide who they are and A&R them themselves. So we gave them 20 festivals a year. Then we'd have new headliners.
How often would you get the artists that you wanted versus how often would you not be able to get them? Was the lineup pretty curated to what Kevin wanted?
There was always, no, it was to what the fans wanted. There was always going to be something I wanted to hear.
For yourself.
There had to be something if I was on the road for 2 months a year that when I heard it in a distance, I'd want to go watch them. That'd be like a band like Rancid. I love that. And I just remember working backstage many times. Oh, Rancid just started. I'm going to go watch a few songs.
You take a break.
Or I find a band like Wallpaper way back when. Wallpaper, Ricky Reed, that's fun. I'm going to go out there and watch that and just watch a few bands. Bowling for Soup, 303, those kind of bands, they always deliver, always fun. But that's going to be something. But I always was, some people would give me shit all the time because they'd say, I watch those bands. I watch those bands. And they say, well, don't you listen to them? I go, I watch those bands, but I'm watching their fans. I'm watching the front of the barricades and seeing if those kids are singing from their hearts the same way we did back when it was the Dead Kennedys or Black Flag. So I became a curator for hopefully a culture a little bit. I'm not curating for a 65-year-old man anymore. I want to listen to the voices of those young people that are looking for a space and place, a community.
What artist really had a massive rise, whether it was an album release or their music video hit this algorithm on TRL?
Well, there was no algorithm. That's the problem. Algorithms didn't exist. Algorithms are fucking weapons of math destruction. There's a book called Weapons of Math Destruction. They are probably the worst thing we have in society, actually. I don't want to say that, but it is, for curation and developing bands. If you really want to go back to Warped Tour, the most massive kind of, it was different things, It's interesting to see Mike Posner coming back right now, He had that moment on Warped Tour, and to watch him coming back after this self-realization growth. But he came out with the #1 album, started on Warped Tour with no album out, ended up by the end of the summer with the #1 album, beat Eminem on a release. I mean, not your typical, maybe people go Warped band, but anyone could be a Warped band. The other one was Katy Perry. In October, when I booked Katy Perry, I was looking for a song for a movie that I was working on. I was introduced to who she was through that You're So Gay video. And I go, I want her on Warped Tour. And someone goes, what? I go, I think this would be good for her. And she came out, and then Kissed a Girl came out about 2 weeks before the tour started. And then throughout that summer, she grew, but she also grew into a live artist because she was challenged every day. I mean, I was challenging her internally because I wrote that schedule every morning. People don't realize I was thinking that schedule really hard. Like, okay, I want Katie to have some challenges. I'm going to put her on right before Bring Me the Horizon.
Crazy.
Or right after Pierce the Veil. They were all on those stages at that point. And you know what? She got better and better live. And those kids that would maybe just turn around and walked away would maybe take 2 steps and go, wait, I want to check this out for a minute. And the next thing you knew a Warped band had it if their crowd got bigger throughout their set. Because people are going to move, like Warped Tour is just like an anthill.
And then it attracts the
And
people.
then all of a sudden they're walking by on the way to get a free Monster or something, and they just turn around and they go, I want to check this out.
What was your first impression of Eminem, and what made you want to bring him to Warped Tour?
Well, I had my exposure to rap. Ice-T was a pretty good friend at that point, and he came on Warped Tour that year too. That was crazy with Ice-T. But I was getting exposed to kind of the rap game. I did Public Enemy. I worked a lot in L.A. in the shows during that period of Public Enemy, Snoop Dogg, N.W.A. I was called the White Devil by some of them, because I was the guy who had to run the shows, and I just didn't give a shit. I was just out there making sure. I walked up to Flavor Flav one time. He was late for a set, and I'm like, yo, motherfucker, you have the biggest clock on. Can't you get anywhere on time? You know, it was like, I just was doing my thing every day working. But I knew the rap. And then all of a sudden, it was Kara Lewis, his agent sent us some stuff because we were actually supposed to have Cypress Hill that year. And for one reason or another, they couldn't do it. And she says, you should check this out. And I listened to it, and I was like, holy shit. I mean, you know, and I love that because so many people were like, I'm turning my back to him. I'm not, fuck him, flip it. And I know now all those people are going, I saw Eminem first on Warped Tour. You know?
I saw him before he
I
blew
saw,
up.
like, well, you had eyes behind. Now you're old people, so you got eyes behind your head, and you're telling your kids that, you know. So it was like, you know. But so many people, I was turning my back to him. I'm like, no, you weren't. You like this kid guy. He had it. He was a little shy back then. He was a little nervous. He's out there on Warped Tour. He had to put up with some people. There was going to be the hardcore, you know, the hardcore haters that are going to, you know, that's okay. You know, that's hopefully, but I'm literally, I bet so many of them are saying, I saw him first on Warped Tour.
When you have somebody who is kind of outside like that, do you have to mentally let them know what to expect and coach them through it?
He was a little shy. He was kind of, you know, he's not a, you know, if you even see him now, he's kind of reserved, kind of, you get him on stage, but as a human being, he kind of like
Keeps to himself.
I didn't push it, but I'd always try to expose people to let him play a barbecue set. Or have him come backstage, do a set for all the other bands. So red, gold, green, aggro lights, wallpaper, pepper. I'd invite him to come play at the barbecue. And I said, flogging Molly, I'd say, come play the barbecue. And everyone would be like, okay, are you sure, Kevin? And by then, as soon as they played, they were like best friends with everyone. Right. They became sometimes the favorite band of the bands. You always want to be, the bands love bands too, you know.
They champion each other.
You know, fans, you know, that's why you see 4 Year Strong. They're good people. They're good people to be around. And bands love being around that band. Now the fans like them too, but they're someone that always is great to have around. They're just good people.
How special was it to get Sum 41's reunion on Warped Tour?
Well, that's really was really important to me. You know, a lot of people go through problems. A lot of people have issues. Going back to how I was on music, I was on the board of Music Cares for 10 years after I learned to understand that about addiction, about mental health. And that started with kind of being around working in the clubs when we lost like Hillel from the Chili Peppers and band members were dying from heroin back then. And then losing Brad Knoll right after the first Warped Tour. Me and Brad used to sit in parking lots and talk about raising our children in the scene. Jacob and my daughter are about the same age. And he never got to see his son grow up. So it was really emotional to me to have Sublime come and play Warped Tour this year, especially that Long Beach show where I had a deal with the managers. One of the managers, we want them to close. I said, no, I want them on at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, right at sunset, the golden hour. They're the perfect golden hour band. And it was a big battle, like with friends of mine. Like it got nasty for a little bit. And I'm like, how to hold my ground. I've learned I hold my ground. And I said, I want them on. And then the band played. And you just saw Jacob, like he'd been doing all right. He'd been playing with them a couple shows, but you just saw this energy come out of him. Like I think his dad, I mean, I'm not a spiritual person that much, but I'm like, if anyone had their father channeling through him at that moment, he just took it to another level during that set. Then the next thing I know, he's walking around backstage with his guitar. He goes out to do an acoustic set. He just fell into that Warped parking lot because I said his father would have never left that Warped parking lot. He loved that tour. And, you know, so understanding that, and I know he just got a little sidetracked, but with Derek, but the whole thing is bringing it back, was Sum 41 was one. They're nice people, and that's we root for nice people in punk. There's some shitty people we like to get rid of, but there's nice people, and they were always nice people. Maybe that's being Canadian. You know, it comes out when you're Canadian. And I always rooted for him, and I didn't know all these things. I read his book, which was crazy, insane. And when they said he was going to come back, I said, "Of course I'm there. You got to be there for them." You know, and I said, and I remember that summer, I mean, he was still dealing with his issues and he was recovering, but he stayed on his bus like 23 and a half hours a day. Like he wasn't comfortable. He wasn't prepared to go to barbecues or hang too much. I think, you know, that's just getting your confidence back. And boy, that half hour that he let go of the energy that summer, those sets were mind blowing.
I got to see him 3 times that summer.
They took it to their Sum 41 was good. Their comeback was like bam, like so. It's interesting because now it's great because Derek's got a sock company and I had him come out and he's welcome to have a booth. I want to support the bands in their other endeavors. So he came and had a sock. But the next thing I know, I don't know if people know, he did a set in Orlando. People don't know he played in Orlando, but he did it with School of Rock.
Yep.
He got on under that tent and just started singing with the kids. So those are the little things that if I can have a little piece of that, helping those artists that way. It's fun to bring Tyson back with All American Rejects. That was a special moment.
Why?
Because I've known Tyson. I knew, I loved them when they were starting out. Whatever had happened in the middle there, I just think he was getting bad advice or whatever was happening. And I always wanted him to come back to work. There was reasons. And then to see when they went back and started this backyard party show. And the first one was at USC in my student's backyard. So to see him do that, and then it was funny because I'm like, okay, this has been great, but I'm going to give them this. They're gonna close out Long Beach. They got to close the stage because I want to show how big and how great they are. Because if you play second to last, people will say, oh, they stayed to see the last band. The hot seat is the last spot on Warped Tour. Closing the Warped Tour stage is so. I was with Tyson a few weeks ago. Tyson, well, that was a great move, you closing in Long Beach, right? He goes, yeah, but you didn't tell us we were closing. I didn't know until the day of the show. And I said, oh, that's right, because you would have gotten nervous. You would have gotten nervous that I had you in that spot. But it was too late when you showed up, and I had announced it already. And just to see that after working so hard, they invested their own money, similar to what I did into putting Warped Tour at the beginning, into their career to go do these backyard shows. And just to have 50, 60,000 people hanging out, singing every word, it's pretty special. And now with his Playhouse, what they're building, love talking. I talked to him yesterday, had a call with him. I think they're, those are the people that are. We have we may not look smart, but there's a lot of really smart people within our scene of music that I think can help take this forward when everything is being driven by an algorithm. There has to be authenticity. We talk about AI taking over the business. We can use it as a tool in our business. I've been talking to will.i.am, who I met on Warped Tour. The Black Eyed Peas started on Warped Tour, about the world he's working with AI. I think there's things we can bring AI that, of course, is the algorithm, but it's still going to take people and creativity to move. And I think that'll come in the indie scene.
How important was it for you to pull all these different elements like skateboarding, punk rock, rap, bring them all together into one festival?
Well, I would work in those clubs, 6 nights a week, 7 nights a week, and I'd see different kinds of music. Everyone wanted to work. Like, if you were a punk dude, you only wanted to work punk shows. I'm like, I wanted to work everything. I was working, like, Persian dance parties. I was working.
Because you loved being around
I just
it?
loved working. And I'm just a worker, really, in the long run. I just get up and work. I get up and work on Warped Tour now. I get up and teach. But I just worked. So if I had an opportunity to work, I was working. A lot of my friends, I was a ski racer in college. I kind of put that sideline to build my career. But I started watching the audiences, once again watching, and I saw the metal kids and I saw the punk kids, but the metal bands were kind of like hazing the younger bands. Metal was known for, like, you sit up on the front of the floor with no one, there's no room for your equipment, don't get any catering, don't do this, don't do that. And I was like, oh man. And punk rock was like, wow, we have half a piece of pizza, or we have a pizza, you want half of it? Oh wow, we'll move our drum kit. Well, it's just those little things. But then I started watching the audiences and going, why are the metal kids paying $10 for a t-shirt, the punk kids $5, and all this kind of, but I was starting to see that it goes back to being when I grew up in a hippie town and they were all wearing patchouli, and then I started coming to Hollywood and they had safety pins in punk, but they had the same ideas. This concept of change, this concept of challenging. Anarchy's cool, but you better have a plan when you have anarchy. I think our president now is just a fucking anarchist, but he has no plan. Anarchy, I always thought, was a punk that could communicate, and we wanted to change things a little bit. So bringing all these kids together, I thought, under one banner because they weren't being played on radio. They weren't getting exposure like Foreigner and Journey or these kind of bands. That if we could unite these people under one umbrella, as Brett Gurewitz once told me from Epitaph, called the Warp Tour, we can make our scene stronger. So I was like, okay, you metal kids, Trivium, come on over. There's some metal kids that want to come over. Oh, you punk kids, come over. Oh, wow. Reggae kind of fits into Warp Tour. That's got a little bit of anarchy mindset. Come on over. Oh, wow. Hip hop. Yeah, you should come over here too. Because the skater kids were listening to everything at the skate park on their boom boxes. They had CDs for everything. And my friends were all skaters and people and I said, oh, bring this together and you have a bigger scene and they can't ignore us anymore. They can't ignore us. So that was when they couldn't ignore us. And then you started having these bands like Blink-182, coming out, and the Warp Tour started getting bigger, and K-Rock was like not playing this music. Radio, they couldn't ignore it anymore. And then they started paying attention to these bands. And that was pretty cool.
Was there a big bump besides when an artist had a massive album, like releasing the Warped Tour DVD or CD, doing Warp Wednesdays or something on Fuse?
It was all pieces. Fuse was a big part because MTV would give us a little coverage. They would do a little piece and thanks, that was great. But everyone was starting to bounce off of Fuse and Rolling Stone at that, or Fuse at MTV at that. They'd have a meeting at MTV and they go over to Fuse and say, do this for us, do this. And I just went into Fuse one day and said, I'm not going to MTV on this trip. I've tried. You want to work together? And I think Warped was bigger than Fuse at that point. I said, let's work together. And Dave Weir, who was awesome, and we sat and he says, yeah, really? You're not going over to MTV? Everyone else does. I go, no, I'm here. I want you to be my partner. And that created Warped Wednesday. That created Warped Roadies. It tied our bands in. The bands would be on Fuse. That was a definite stop they made.
They do interviews at the festival.
At the festival. We tied in, and then we tied in sponsorship. Sometimes people didn't see where we were shooting advertisement that would also fit on TV. That would be part of the Warped activations. So it was a great relationship. And then same thing with AP Magazine, Mike Shea. People were going, Rolling Stone felt obligated to give us like a paragraph at one point, Spin maybe 2 paragraphs. And I'm like, no, these bands need more exposure. And I saw what Mike Shea was trying to do with AP Magazine, and it was kind of going back and forth and all different kinds of things. And I said, hey, Mike, why don't we become the magazine of this scene? Warped and you. We walk hand in hand. So then they made that program we gave away for free every year. You couldn't open an AP magazine like in May without it being, see them on Warped Tour. Every band had ads in there. It was a really great ecosystem. Trying to build that ecosystem right now is hard because we don't have the print that we used to. So finding these new tools is really important to me. And that's why with will.i.am, FYI Radio, that will start integrating AI into your discussion with a band. That's the problem. We scroll, bam, bam, bam on scrolling. But how do we really find out more about those artists? How do we really dig deeper on who these people are, why we want to support them as people, So that's why I still encourage the bands to go do free signings at Warped Tour, because that free signing makes a lifelong fan. When you monetize that signing by charging for a VIP, it's a monetization, different relationship.
Would you attribute something like the Maine walking the line every morning of Warped Tour as to their 20-year anniversary?
Maine, Mayday Parade, those bands are, less than Jake. What are they, 30-something years old now? It takes a long time. It's a lot. It's work, and they put in the work. I was so stoked when the Maine walked the line this year. In 2000, they were like, we're going to go back to our old school style. We might be back on the cusp of things with that CD. CDs are back. I was in Boston last week speaking at Berkeley College, and I had 2 people hand me CDs. I haven't been handed a CD. Now I just got to figure out how to play them again, but it was kind of cool. So we resurrected that CD. That CD was so important. 50 bands for $5.
Crazy. I remember buying an FYE. Who were you going to see this summer?
Yeah, and now, we have our playlists that are launching and being, activated now. So they're kind of cool. People can jump in and listen to the bands before they come. And that's why we do those bands, the rollouts. I mean, that's a lot of a lot of work, the 30 days to Warped or 38 days of Warped, because I want those littlest bands on a poster to have as much potential exposure as a Rise Against or someone. Um, and that comes from study that's talking to fans, talking to students. Most people look at a festival poster and decide if they like it within 2 to 3 lines
From seeing the headliners.
from just looking at the headline. They don't dig way down.
That's what I
Now,
loved about the Warped posters is you have to scroll through everywhere.
yeah, so do we have the attention span to scroll? I don't know. This is a different time and place. So we're doing a little advertising change up. We're never going to change that first model, but when you break up the lineup a little bit and highlight certain segments of music and bands, people are going, all of them are on Warped Tour this year? I didn't know. Well, the poster's been on there. You've seen that, right? Oh, yeah, I saw that. But I didn't know. And then when you break it up a little bit, they're like, oh, crap, Warped lineup this year's really stacked. You know?
What do you think when you hear Sonny Moore is climbing the top of the rafter of the stage and he's jumping into the crowd?
Sonny Moore.
From first to last.
I know. Well, that's a better story for you than Sonny Moore climbing into that. Sonny was a neighbor. He grew up in La Cañada area when they went to school with my daughters.
From first to last?
First to last. So then he started first to last, and they came out on Warped Tour. And there's some Fuse segments. We did this one little mini TV series with them, and they had management. There's a moment in time where bands were getting big advances and spending a lot of money. They showed up on Warped Tour with 2 tour buses, like new band, which you never had 2 tour buses. No one had 2 tour buses. And I was hanging out with Sonny, and I go, Sonny, man, you got to be careful here, man. This stuff costs money. You're taking advances. You're doing this thing. If you're not careful, man, I don't want to come down and see you changing oil down the street at Jiffy Lube. I told him that. That summer, his voice blew out. When his voice changed. When his voice changed, I think he couldn't hitting those notes. So they left the tour. They had to drop off the tour. He went home, started this whole the EDM world was just kicking off. It was like a couple days off, and he invited me to come out to hear what he was doing. He came out at the end of the tour and played in Pomona, California, his first kind of out of the Koreatown set. Played on the stage. I didn't know what it was. It was
Of the early stages of Skrillex?
Yeah, this was early. This was like his first outside of the warehouse. Come back to Warped Tour in Pomona. And I'm like, fuck, I don't get this. But I go, you know what? I'm going to book him. And so I sent an offer for $1,000 a show. I said, Sonny, I'll give you $1,000 a show. Come out on the tour bus, travel around. His manager was like, Kevin, you got to give him $1,500. I'm like, $1,500 for that shit? No, I mean, I'm like, and God damn it, he was making like $100,000 by the summertime. I mean, I love him. He is the nicest, kindest person. I run into him infrequently, but he's still that same Sonny that was going to school with my daughters. He's a very, very humble, very nice, appreciative person of where his life has gone.
Could you tell when a Blink-182 was going to blow up that they had magic in their set? The way they were able to command the crowd?
Absolutely. That's why I let them ride on my tour bus in, I think, 97. They couldn't afford a vehicle to get around, so they rode with me all summer. Wow. Yeah, it's hard for me to look at them now as old men because I saw them in their underwear when they were, late teens or whatever they were out there. It might be a little creepy, but, I think, no, you knew, it didn't take long to realize that when someone has it,
Did you have to bump anybody up from a smaller stage to a larger stage mid-festival?
No. Sometimes if I had room, I would. It was more like convincing a band that, like Sugar Ray, started on Warped Tour. Sugar Ray was in a band called the Shrinky Dinks, an earlier punk band from Orange County. The Shrinky Dinks was Mark's band. I put him on Warped Tour because I knew the Shrinky Dinks, Sugar Ray. They came out. And then Fly came out. Talk about a song that blew up. But their manager and their agent came and started giving me they were on the tour bus, about the second, third show. We were at Dominguez Hills for Warped Tour. And they said, you got to move them up to the main stage. You got to move them up or we're going to drop off the tour. K-Rock's yelling at me because now they're starting to get played on radio with Fly. And I'm like, No. I said, I booked them on that stage. They can welcome to stay, but they only have one hit on that album. Have more hits, then I would like then you move up. But if you only have one hit, it might be a one-hit wonder. But if they're out here grinding it out with us, we'll always respect them. Let me talk to the band, just say thank you. I understand why you have to leave. I went in and talked to the band, and I remember Mark saying, why doesn't anyone else talk to us this way? Makes total sense. They stayed, and they were selling 70,000 records a week, and they were playing on a 2-foot stage that summer.
Do you remember the name of the stage at that point?
Oh, it was like the Volcom 1-foot stage or 2-foot. It was crazy, and I'll just never forget. We were in Chicago, and the promoter wasn't going to pay us. Like, they weren't going to pay us because they said we lost too much money. I think this was 96. This would have been 96, yeah. So it wasn't 97. It was 96. So promoter was like, I'm not paying you unless all the bands play. I'm like, fuck, it's raining. There's lightning kind of off in the distance. And we're like, just trying to get Les and Jake was playing under a blue tarp. We didn't have stages with, it was crazy. And also we put Mark McGrath up and it's getting to the end. And it's like, oh crap, the lightning again. And he got like shocked. and we're like, keep singing because the promoter was like, and he finished the song. And I go, that's it, you're paying us. And the promoter gave us the money to get, I needed every penny to get to the next city. And, it was like, I'll never forget, United Center parking lot. And it was just like everyone pulled together. And I tell you, that gave, we still all respect Mark McGrath. I'm like, I'd love Sugar Ray to come back and do a Warped Tour now. It'd be great, right?
What I find most impressive is you found Warped Tour, and you have to deal with all these different personalities, from the band's egos to the managers, the agents, and everybody's trying to pull you in a different direction. That I imagine your day-to-day is just one problem after another, whether it's weather, the venue.
The weather was my biggest problem. When we got out on the road, there wasn't a lot of problems, usually.
Contracts are in, is what it is.
The bands are, out. The agents know I'm on the parking lot. I was at every show except for a couple. And there was a reason I went to every show after being gone for 2. All the shit went crazy in 1996 when I left for a couple days. It got so out of hand. It was crazy. It included a porta potty on fire into a river that gets washed into the water system of Lawrence, Kansas, to the bands revolting against the merchandise rate in a venue. And
from your few days away.
We had shows canceled because promoters said this tour's out of control. We had 2 shows cancel. We had no money, so we called a friend up in Buffalo at Darien Lake who has the amusement park, and I go, dude, I need to hide out here. Like we're like renegades. We don't have money for hotels. He goes, okay, I don't have shows for 2 days. You guys are welcome to camp backstage. I'll open up some bathrooms for you. I'll give you guys tickets to the amusement park. I mean, I know I'm skimming over, but that story was mind-boggling because at that point I was also managing Les and Jake, and I was managing H2O, and Les and Jake was one of the biggest instigators of the problem with Pennywise. No one wanted to sell the merch in the venue, so they went to a gas station and set up PA, and the promoters were, it was pretty wild. And then I realized I need to be there every day.
Were you ever concerned that in those early days that a Woodstock kind of thing could happen where
No.
not an issue?
Never an issue. Never an issue. Warp shows were mellow. True music fans. We had little issues in certain markets. There was, there was a violent scene in punk rock in LA at that point, but that's why I ended the shows by dark. Because 90% of the problems at shows were caused by 10% of the people. It's just like civilization. At night is when most crimes are committed. So you put them out in the sunshine, and there was like 12,000 people and 20 people causing problems.
Would the festival end at like 8?
8:30, 9 of the latest, depends on the sunset, and literally in LA there was probably about 20 troublemakers, and I just got on the stage and said, it's over. And all the kids, like 12,000 kids, just grabbed them and threw them over the barricade, like the troublemakers. I said, time to take control of the scene back. We had to deal with a straight edge punk up in Salt Lake City. So we had issues that we went, but we confronted them. And it's not a perfect society. Later on, there's definitely some controversies around 2017. This is when I was expecting the managers and agents to send me good people because I didn't know them. And sometimes I inherited their problems. And then I was forced to deal with them on the road. And when you're on the road, you have to make decisions right or wrong, but very quickly because you've got a lot going on. And I always tell people, people will be critical of me. That's fine. But at the end of the day, come stack up your life and see how hard I've tried and see how hard you've tried.
Being a festival promoter around the entire country, you're dealing with all these different kinds of weather. You have to deal with earthquake insurance or hurricane and
Well, the weather insurance is definitely more important now. That was one of the reasons. People go, "Oh, he must have stopped. He wasn't making a lot of money." Well, it had nothing to do with the money. It had to do that the weather is changing. I was on the road for 30 straight summers between Lollapalooza and Warped Tour, and no one can tell me that the climate has not changed. It has changed. The storms last longer. It used to be 15-minute showers at 4 o'clock in Florida. Count on them, be over in 15 minutes. Now they go all day long. Lightning comes backwards. It used to go over the swamp. On the West Coast, if it goes over the swamp, we were good. On the East Coast, if it stays over the swamp, you're good. Then it goes out over the ocean, then comes back to the swamp. It was all these ways I learned about weather. I'd climb to the highest mountain. I mean, a lot of things I did. Now we have technology that says that can help us, but I still think I had a lot of good gut instinct of like when to start and stop shows.
what did you view your role as on the day-to-day?
I had so many good people working for me, and everyone that worked on that tour gave a crap. Ultimately, they gave a crap about their job. Whether you had the smallest band and you had to set up your 10 by 10, you knew that it had to be up by 10 in the morning, and you had to be organized and pay attention.
Is that mentality from the top down because you cared
Yeah,
so much?
I think so. I absolutely. I think I worked with so many people that I grew up with in the venues of LA, all these shows we were working, festivals we were working. My leadership is a little probably different than other people. Everyone has their own leadership styles. Mine was be in the middle of the mix all the time. I get along better with the crew than I do with the top agent, let's say, or the label president. I respect their jobs, and I can have a conversation. I can have a conversation with a CEO of something, but I can also hang out with my crew because they know I've been in the middle of the wars with them.
Who were some of your most proud bookings that you were able to make happen for the Warped Tour?
When's this air?
I can hold it till whenever you want. So if there's an
Well,
announcement coming up,
I'll leak you right now.
please.
We're going to be announcing a Real Big Fish reunion
That's crazy.
for Long Beach. Yeah,
When was the last time they played?
5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, that to me right now, last year, getting a Dance Hall Crashers reunion together. That's where I'm having fun. My booker, Amanda's wonderful. And she could do 90% now of, like, we talk, we kind of think through things, but I come in at the 10% to help structure the deals maybe a little bit with her, get creative to think things through. But I'm having fun calling old friends saying, you need to get your band back together. There's a moment in time. I think ska's coming back. I think we're ready for the fourth wave, because I was listening to like the Millingtons and some of these young bands, and I go, you were like leaders of that scene. Come back. You had a lot. Your songs are great. We need to get you back. So we'll be announcing that this week.
Wow. Thank you for that.
I'm super interested that I finally talked. We're announcing the Front Bottoms will be joining in DC. That's going to be cool. I tried to get them on Warped Tour forever. So sometimes it takes a while, but I know I think people will love them. And I think if they expose themselves out to Warped Tour, it'll be really great for them. They'll have fun. I wish those bands, some of the bands I think, overthink, Warped was a platform. We had people that said, I don't want Attila says, suck my fuck. I'm going, well, yeah, don't you want to go play? Because fans aren't going to be walking around 5 years now saying, suck my fuck. It means something. I never knew what it means. But wouldn't you want to go out there and influence their fans to maybe jump over? And some bands didn't play Warped Tour that I think would have done really well out there.
Like who?
La Dispute, Touche Amore. Those bands, those bands I thought had something to say. But, you gotta be willing to go out there and put yourself out in front of people.
What's it like for you to see an artist like A Day to Remember from where they started to where they are now?
Great human beings. Couldn't be happier for those guys. Good human beings. Raising families now, doing their thing. Some people, who might have been the most successful person ever in the Warped Tour parking lot? Jeffree Star. You got to think through that.
How so?
Came out of MySpace. All right? Came from MySpace. I like to create a petri dish of people. Bringing Jeffree Star into the Warped Tour was amazing, just how uncomfortable he made everyone feel, because he's like the prettiest person on earth, you know? So the toughest hardcore punk would be like, oh, wow, you're kind of good looking. Oh, wait, it was just me. But Jeffree could have just lived the MySpace thing, and yes, people get in controversies with him, whatever. But when you really see him spend time with young people who might be going through that kind of confusing time when you're developing your own sexuality and understanding who you are, taking time to sit one-on-one backstage with someone, or taking time to talk to them, and then being smart as a business person to create a brand around himself, and seeing, I mean, he came back last summer and I think signed autographs for 6-7 hours.
Wow.
Just stood there thanking people. Now, there's controversy, but a lot of controversy is created online. We all know that. That's like a world. You know, and I know people give shit to Ronnie Radke, but I've seen the other side of Ronnie Radke. I've seen him work with Make-A-Wish kids. I've seen him work with kids who have had problems. He had problems. His life was kind of fucked up when he was younger, you know? I see that maybe the more that human side of people, not what you create on a stage. Stage is, you know, I play golf with Matt from Avenged Sevenfold, but if you saw him on the street, you would not even know he was in a band, but you put him on that stage in the leather, the vibe, you know, I know more of a little bit of it. I like to get to know some of these people as humans, you know.
Falling in Reverse's set has all the pyro, the explode.
I don't know what the hell with pyro. I think I blame Falling in Reverse.
Why?
Not Falling in Reverse. I bring Fall Out Boy.
For the pyro?
For all these bands use so much pyro now. No one used to use pyro. Fall Out Boy, I went and saw them up in Pennsylvania. They were playing with Paramore one time, and we were out there, and we went and saw, and it was like the first time I saw this type of music using flame. And they gave us great seats. We were like in the front row, and it was like, I'm like, dude, I got to get up. My eyebrows are getting singed. Like, it was hot. Like, you know, it was burning. And I'm like, oh my God, our bands are now becoming those bands.
Could you tell that when they were on those small stages, they'd become rock stars?
The only one that I knew ultimately would be a rock star was Avenged Sevenfold, because they showed up on Warped Tour with a smoke machine. It was the first prop ever used on Warped Tour. They had this smoke machine. It'd be 2 PM, bright sun, and they'd be running their smoke machine. And I go, they are going to be rock stars. They're already, no, you know who has it or not, you know. A few years ago, that was Youngblood, you know, when he came out and played, when he was just starting on Warped Tour. And I was emailing his manager recently, and he goes, I remember when you just told me he has it. He's going to go. I saw him play one song, met him. He came to my house a few times. What a nice person, genuine person. That COVID only slowed him down a bit, because he was just starting 2018, came back and did Warped Tours, those final shows in 2019. And then I just go, oh, he's gone. Like, that's the one that's like, going to go to the sky. And I think COVID slowed that down a little bit. But look where he's going right now.
Yeah.
You know, look where he's going. I mean, there's nothing holding him back, you know, right now.
I interviewed John from the Main last week.
Yeah.
And they have their 8123 Fest. And I
Yeah.
asked him if he had any questions for you. And he was wondering, I could be butchering it a little bit, but what kept you going year after year to want to continue to put it on, whether it was the toughest year, the not profitable year? How were you able to still keep going?
Oh, maybe a little bit out of, like, what else was I going to do with my life? No, no, it was just being there at the front doors and watching the crowd come in and turning a lot of people onto the live festival experience. And then watching them leave at the end of the day, just pumped on live music. And I have a knack for producing festivals. I'm not good at much else. I was never going to be a pro skateboarder. And one thing I was is skiing, but I'm never going to be a great skateboarder. I can't play an instrument. I'm pretty much tone deaf, but I can hear between the notes. That's what I like to say. I hear between the notes. And I wanted to be around this my whole life. This is what I wanted to do. I'm now 45 years into a career. I just turned 65 this week. And I produced my first show, well, about 40, when I was 19.
Was it a lot more profitable then?
When I was 19? No, I started out, I had a program that I'd do $2 Tuesdays. I'd give each band $1. What did that leave for me? We'd get the door, it was $2, and I'd give each band $1. I've never been a good business person. I didn't make any money. I was out there, I was using a student center over at Citrus College in Glendora. They had a PA, and I was working, giving change out in the student center. And I just would do these shows and cool bands like 3 o'clock, some of these older bands, Stepmothers, Unforgiven. There was a scene of music back then. They would come play in the student center. We'd do a show when no one was on campus. All the administrators left. And I had to stay there until 10 o'clock. I think that was for night school. I had to be in the student center. And I just started doing shows. And then I'd clean up the parking lots myself because if anyone was drinking, didn't want any indication that there was a show. And they had one security guard on campus, and we were friends. She was a great woman, and she let me do them. And we never told the administrators we were doing this.
Oh, that's crazy.
And there were no cameras back then recording anything, and we would do these shows. So no, I'm never a good businessman. I should have had $3 Thursdays. It was like $1 for me and one for each of bands. No, and a lot of people will say, and I've ended up doing well in life, but I never took advantage of a scene. I think punk rock allows you to make a nice living. Brett Gurewitz, Fat Mike, but we all give back as much as we put in.
What was important for you to put in the Punk Rock Museum? What did you want? Because Warped Tour has its own exhibit.
Oh, yeah.
There.
I don't know. As my wife says, I have better stuff I've thrown away than in there.
I can't imagine the collectibles that you have.
Well, no, I've given them all away. I don't really have as much. I just pass them on. I mean, and I was like, you sit and reflect. I was telling my wife the other day, they just had a thing at my house for, when I turned 65. And I go, I don't reflect on my life. I don't reflect backwards. I'm always looking forward. And I tell people that's a good life to lead because the only thing you're going to do is run out of time. I'm never going to run out of things to do.
Do you have a plaque that means a lot to you that a band gave to you for helping push them at a certain point?
God, I have the original Ramones signed artwork from the band. That's pretty cool. The original flyer that they made. Arturo Vega gave me, who designed that eagle, gave me that. It's in a pile in my garage somewhere. It's nice sometimes. Ice Nine Kills. I just remember their career could have been so screwed up, and they just fought through it. They had a shitty record deal. We helped them get them out of there. We helped that band a lot because they're good people. And to see where they've kind of gone, Ice Nine Kills, just good people. I like to support good people. You became a better person, I think, being on Warped Tour. Most people. There's going to be an exception, but most of the people became better people from being out on that tour.
Did you try getting 21 Pilots for Warped Tour?
Oh yeah, I had a book until their agent talked them out of doing it. Joe Calitri signed them to the record deal, just like he was through. Also worked with Paramore, worked with all those bands
on Fueled By.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, I could have been a partner on Fueled By. That's the crazy thing. I was managing Less Than Jake, and Vinny was a partner on Fueled By. And Vinny's like, you should join our record label. You should be a partner in this record label. I'm like, nah, Vinny, I'm already working with Side One Dummy. I can't, I got too much going on. Boy, was I stupid, right? I mean, see, that's the business thing. Think about that. But I had them booked on Warp, and then their agent talked them out of doing it.
Hindsight's obviously 2020, and you hear these stories like Blockbuster could have bought Netflix. Are there any opportunities that come to mind where somebody wanted to partner with Warped Tour?
Oh, I should have taken stock in Monster instead of free water.
What do you mean?
Well, I developed the aluminum canned water.
That was a Warped Tour
That was
staple.
developed for Warped Tour because I needed something. I needed water for the bands. And at that point, I didn't have money. I was broke. So if I had a brand that could help me with water, I'll help your brand. And they were Monster. I probably should have taken stock in that company,
Did they offer it to you?
I'd be smarter now and say, I need some stock in your startup company because I'm going to help market you to a bigger audience. I'm going to help you there. If I had stock in that, it was the only stock that had outperformed Amazon at one point was Monster. Not that smart, but I had a lot of water.
You did. You kept people
I kept people hydrated, and that was more important at that moment. Everything is important at the moment.
What was the toughest weather? Would heat really affect the way the Warped Tour ran?
Heat, we seemed to fight through. just heat.
What about people passing out?
Oh, we developed a lot of the techniques used at festivals today. It was great. We were the guinea pig on so many things. But like when we started Warped Tour, most of these venues, they just took the people to a medical center. We were the ones who started building a tent by the stage with the fans and the ice and everything else that went into it.
Because people were able to bounce back from that.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it almost noon?
Yeah. Do you need to go?
I have to call it noon, or I could do it here if you want to do more.
No. Yeah, we're good. This is amazing.
Okay.
Let me just see.
Sorry to cut in, but I got to be on this call with.
That was spot on for time. It's 11:57. Awesome, Kevin. Thanks so much for coming by.
No, yeah, I hope to do this again.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I need to put this in a book, I guess, at some point.
Yeah, you should. Has anyone ever approached you?
They talk about it. I've outlined, but I just never had. You know, I'm so busy. I need to stop for a
Yeah,
while.
but the stories in there are probably insane.
No, they're coming out right now. Most of them. Some of them. Some not that it was. You scratch the surface. Someone could just mention something. I'll go, oh, there's a story to tell you with that.
Sunnymore was really cool.
That's what teaching is for me.
Yeah.
It ties in the lesson, but into teaching. And 70% of my classes are entertaining, and they will retain the 30% that I want them to.
All right, guys, go see Warped Tour.
Yeah.
And see ya. Bye.
Bye.
That was awesome.
All right.